What will happen to Donald Trump if whistleblower testimony confirms DOJ deception? What happens when the carefully guarded walls of power begin to crack? Tonight, we face a question that could reshape not only the future of Donald Trump, but the credibility of the entire Department of Justice. A whistleblower has stepped forward, alleging deception at the highest levels. And if that testimony holds true, it could unravel years of political cover-ups, exposing a trail of lies and abuse of power that Trump has long denied. The stakes could not be higher for justice, for democracy, and for Trump's own survival. Stay tuned as we break it down right now. The intersection of law, politics, and accountability in America has always been fraught with tension. When the Department of Justice, the very institution meant to safeguard the Constitution, faces allegations of deception, the stakes rise exponentially. And when those allegations involve Donald Trump and his administration's handling of immigration cases, the spotlight intensifies. The case of Abreu Garcia, a Salvadoran man living in the United States with his family, has evolved from a personal legal battle into a symbol of defiance against executive overreach. Now, with whistleblower testimony suggesting DOJ deception in his case, the question before us is profound. What happens if this testimony is confirmed? And what does it mean for Donald Trump? This commentary will analyze the origins of the Garcia case, the allegations of misconduct, the implications of whistleblower revelations, and the potential consequences for Donald Trump's legal and political future. By examining the interplay between court rulings, executive defiance, and systemic accountability, we can better understand how this single case represents a much larger battle for the integrity of American democracy. Abreu Garcia's story begins like that of many immigrants who arrive in the United States seeking stability and opportunity. He was legally present with a wife who is a U.S. citizen and children born in this country. Over the years, Garcia faced accusations, painted by his opponents as criminal, gang-related, and deeply disqualifying. Yet in courtroom after courtroom, federal judges reviewed the evidence and ruled in his favor. He won in Tennessee before a magistrate judge. He prevailed before Judge Paula Zenas in Maryland on constitutional grounds. Those decisions were affirmed twice by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and even the United States Supreme Court upheld protections in his case. Despite those victories, Garcia remained targeted. The Trump administration sought his removal, at times with tactics resembling coercion. Reports suggest he was pressured to accept a plea deal that would require him to admit guilt to questionable charges in exchange for leniency. Rejecting such a deal, Garcia became the subject of increasingly aggressive attempts at deportation. At one point, plans were allegedly set in motion to send him not to his home country of El Salvador, but to Uganda, raising alarm about ulterior motives and disregard for due process. Judge Zenas intervened forcefully. In a hearing, she declared that Garcia's removal was absolutely forbidden until an evidentiary process could be completed. The extraordinary language she used underscored the frustration of a judiciary repeatedly undermined by executive defiance. Her order was not simply about one man. It was about reaffirming the rule of law in the face of political manipulation. At the heart of the emerging scandal lies whistleblower testimony. Ezra Reveney, a former DOJ official connected to the Garcia case, alleged that deception occurred in communications with the court. According to the whistleblower, DOJ attorney Drew Ensign misled Judge Zenas about the removal process, downplaying both the speed and the intentions behind Garcia's transfer. Reveney asserted that he was fired for telling the truth, for resisting unlawful orders, and for exposing how Garcia was previously sent to El Salvador in violation of judicial instructions, where he was allegedly tortured upon arrival. If corroborated, these claims amount to more than bureaucratic missteps. They suggest deliberate deception by government lawyers acting in service of political objectives. They imply that the DOJ under Trump became not a guardian of justice, but a tool of executive will. And they raise the possibility that Trump himself, directly or indirectly, sanctioned or benefited from this pattern of misconduct. Whistleblower testimony carries weight precisely because it comes from within. Unlike outside critics or partisan opponents, A whistleblower speaks from personal knowledge, often at great personal risk. Revenue's account, if supported by evidence, could trigger profound consequences, not only for the lawyers involved, but for the former president who oversaw the environment in which such misconduct occurred. The constitutional issues raised here cannot be overstated. The writ of habeas corpus, often described as the cornerstone of liberty, guarantees that no person can be detained without legal justification. It is a safeguard against arbitrary executive power. When Judge Zenas ordered that Garcia not be removed pending review, she was exercising her constitutional role to check the government. To ignore that order or to mislead the court about compliance is not merely bad practice, it is contempt of court, an assault on separation of powers, and a betrayal of constitutional duty. Trump's administration had already shown patterns of testing legal boundaries. From travel bans to federal deployments in cities, the former president often invoked executive authority in ways that courts later questioned or struck down. The Garcia case is emblematic of that broader trend. If DOJ lawyers, under pressure from political superiors, deliberately defied a federal judge, it exposes the fragility of constitutional protections when confronted with authoritarian impulses. The whistleblower testimony alleging deception therefore strikes at the very foundation of American governance. It is not only about immigration law, but about whether any administration can manipulate the judiciary to achieve political goals. So what happens to Donald Trump if whistleblower testimony confirms DOJ deception? The answer unfolds across several dimensions: legal, political, and historical. Legally, Trump faces the possibility of heightened scrutiny in ongoing investigations. While the Garcia case itself may not lead directly to criminal charges against him, it could serve as evidence of a broader pattern of abuse. If it is demonstrated that he encouraged or tolerated deception in one case, it bolsters claims that he did so elsewhere, whether in obstruction of justice, election interference, or financial misconduct. Politically, confirmation of DOJ deception feeds into a narrative already damaging to Trump, that his presidency was marked by lawlessness, disregard for institutions, and contempt for checks and balances. For his supporters, such allegations may be dismissed as partisan attacks, but for independents and moderates, they reinforce doubts about his fitness to lead. As Trump seeks to return to power, revelations that his DOJ engaged in deception will complicate his efforts to portray himself as the victim of unfair persecution. Instead, he risks being seen as the perpetrator of systemic abuse. Historically, the episode may cement Trump's legacy as a president who tested and often broke the unwritten norms of governance. The Garcia case could be remembered alongside other moments when the judiciary had to restrain executive power. In that sense, whistleblower confirmation of DOJ deception would not only damage Trump's immediate prospects, but also shape how future generations assess his presidency. Beyond Trump, this case raises urgent questions about the health of American democracy. If DOJ lawyers felt compelled to deceive judges, what does that reveal about the culture within the agency during Trump's tenure? If whistleblowers must risk their careers to expose misconduct, what protections exist for truth tellers? And if federal judges must resort to extraordinary language like absolutely forbidden, what does that signal about executive compliance with judicial authority? The Garcia case highlights the delicate balance between national security, immigration enforcement, and individual rights. It reminds us that constitutional safeguards are only as strong as the officials entrusted to uphold them. If those officials succumb to political pressure, the safeguards collapse. This is why whistleblower testimony is so critical. It provides a window into the inner workings of government, revealing practices that might otherwise remain hidden. And if confirmed, it compels Congress, the courts, and the public to demand accountability, not only from individual lawyers, but from the leaders who set the tone. Judge Zenas' defiance in the Garcia case illustrates the resilience of the judiciary, but also its vulnerability. She faced a Justice Department that appeared willing to sidestep her orders. She confronted lawyers who allegedly misled her, and she knew that powerful political figures, including Trump himself, would label her decisions as partisan or ideological. Yet she persisted, affirming the Constitution and insisting on due process. But judges cannot be the sole line of defense. If whistleblower testimony confirms deception, it shows that even the most determined jurist can be undermined by executive misconduct. Judicial independence requires not only brave judges, but also honest lawyers and accountable leaders. The erosion of any one element threatens the system as a whole. For Trump, this dynamic is particularly dangerous. If his administration is remembered for systematically undermining judicial authority, he will be associated not with strength, but with lawlessness. That image may resonate differently with his base and his critics, but it will define the historical record. Several scenarios could unfold if whistleblower testimony confirming DOJ deception is verified. First, there could be disciplinary consequences for the lawyers involved, including disbarment or sanctions. Such measures would reinforce professional norms and signal that deception before a court is intolerable. Second, Congress could initiate hearings to investigate broader patterns of misconduct within the DOJ during Trump's tenure. These hearings could uncover further evidence of politicization, adding to the already substantial body of criticism about Trump's approach to governance. Third, Trump himself could face political fallout. Opponents would cite the Garcia case as yet another example of his disregard for the law. Media coverage would intensify, and voters would be forced to grapple with the implications of supporting a candidate associated with systemic deception. Fourth, the judiciary could respond by tightening rules around immigration cases and executive compliance with habeas corpus orders. Such reforms would be designed to prevent recurrence, but they would also stand as a testament to the damage inflicted during Trump's administration. Ultimately, the confirmation of DOJ deception would represent a seismic moment, reshaping not only Trump's future, but the very landscape of accountability in American politics. The story of Abrao Garcia is more than an immigration case. It is a mirror reflecting the tension between executive ambition and constitutional restraint. At its center lies a man whose rights have become symbolic of a larger struggle. Around him swirl allegations of DOJ deception, whistleblower courage, and judicial defiance. And looming over it all is Donald Trump, a former president whose legacy and future hinge on whether the rule of law can withstand his defiance. If whistleblower testimony is confirmed, Trump faces not only reputational damage, but potential legal and political consequences. More importantly, America faces a reckoning with how fragile its institutions become when truth is subordinated to power. The Garcia case reminds us that democracy requires vigilance, that judges must insist on constitutional fidelity, that whistleblowers must be protected, and that leaders must be held accountable. The ultimate question, then, is not only what will happen to Donald Trump, but what will happen to the United States if deception within its highest institutions is allowed to stand. The answer to that question will shape the nation's future just as much as the fate of any one man. If whistleblower testimony truly confirms deception inside the Department of Justice, Donald Trump faces not just political embarrassment, but a legal reckoning that could undermine his defense strategy across multiple cases. This moment underscores how fragile his narrative becomes when insiders expose misconduct. Courts will not ignore sworn testimony, and the potential consequences range from new charges to collapsing credibility in front of judges and juries. The coming weeks could mark a turning point. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more expert analysis. See you next time.